Hey everyone, Taylor should be here soon, I imagine.
Hey everyone, welcome. We'll be getting started here in 5 minutes. Give people time to log on. How's married life treating you, Michaela?
Good.
Awesome. Glad to hear. Your weekend not honeymoon. Were you at the tire store today?
Yeah, 'cause there's a Zitting family reunion this weekend
Mm,
and my brakes are basically dead. And we have to go down to St. George. So I had to get my brakes replaced.
gotcha. I'm sorry. I'm sure that's not cheap these days.
It's okay.
So down in southern Utah, are there quite a few zittings like in Centennial, or is it like actually Hilldale? Uh, Cen- uh,
I don't know. I just know it's in Hurricane.
okay.
So
Yeah, I think that's
it's
somewhat
along for
close.
the ride.
Yeah, somewhat close to Short Creek. Is Zach at work, or is he going to be able to join us tonight?
Hopefully he'll join us. He texted me like half an hour ago that he's finally headed to the shop. So he might be late.
No problem. Hey, I guess while we're waiting and kind of handling some administrative things, I realize next week is Zoe Erickson and Braxton Bogard's wedding at this time, like right at 6 o'clock next Thursday. Um, so Justin might need you. You're going to be traveling? Are you going to be available next Thursday, or do we need to?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Okay,
Um, maybe, maybe.
okay. Well, I guess we'll talk later. Get that all figured out. How's your week been, Andrew?
It's been okay here. I was about to say, do any of you know any nice single Mormon fundamentalist woman that that's available?
That is a great question. I mean, yes, I know several. Where are you located again?
I'm in I'm in Kansas City, so I'm about 2 hours north of Stockton.
Okay, so I live in Utah. The community and people that I associate with are more out west. The challenge is there's an interesting dynamic in kind of fundamentalist culture that is very anti-dating in many instances. And like any time a man takes initiative and tries to initiate a conversation or relate, get to know people, uh, because of kind of PTSD from the olden days when there were a lot of kind of predators and men trying to just wife hunt and that sort of thing. I know there's a bit of a resistance to just normal friendly interactions. Um, so it may be more of an issue of becoming part of a community and earning trust, and it may take some time. I'm just being very honest and upfront with my observations. Are you able to go down to like meetings on Sundays from where you're at, or is that too far of a commute?
It's too smart of a commute.
Okay.
So if I'm like down there for a temple session, then I can like stay through that Sunday. But like, yeah, I can't just go down.
Yeah. I'm not saying every week, but if you could make a trip like once a month or something, I think that would show it would probably help you build some friendships, help people get to know you and build some trust that way. I think that is a precursor um, to uh, potential prospects with fundamentalist ladies. And
Okay.
in their defense, you study some of the history in Mormonism, fundamentalism. There are some issues, so I think it's just an overreaction. Hopefully, that can be healed generationally as things improve and better principles are implemented. But that is I would say, the current state of things. The other option is if you're in Kansas City, you could always go to LDS meetings and look for like-minded. I know that's very difficult to find, non-radicalized feminist women in some of those circles, but uh, I think that there are some. Follow the spirit, and I wish you all the best, brother. Maybe we can talk more offline afterward if you want to continue that conversation.
Okay. I'm gonna cry myself to sleep tonight, so it's okay.
No, we'll pray for you, man. There's a woman out there. I know God's preparing her, you and her, and so keep that faith, and don't give up. Well, let's go ahead and begin tonight's conversation. And this, while Justin and I are going to be kind of leading, it's a conversation. And so if you have thoughts, feedback, uh, pushback, if you feel like we're missing something, we welcome that. And so we appreciate everybody being here, your attendance, and um, let's have an opening prayer. Hey Andrew, since I know you can talk, would you be willing to come off and mute and give us an opening prayer?
Sure.
Thank you.
My Father in heaven, we ask for your spirit to be here with us here as we engage in this gospel discussion. And we pray that we'll feel open to speak what's on our heart. We pray that our mouths will be opened up and our minds will be opened up, and that we will receive what you intend for us to receive this evening. And we do pray for this in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, brother. All right. So tonight, Justin's going to be kind of leading the conversation, but again, it's a conversation, not a lecture. So go ahead, Justin.
All right. This might be a bit of a repeat if anybody was at the sacrament meeting last Saturday. Saturday, but I was telling Taylor a little bit about it, and it's just really good to get back into the basics sometimes. And the Book of Mormon is the core of my testimony. It's what has the teachings in the Book of Mormon are what grounded me as I dealt with the transition and of going from LDS Church to independent fundamentalist and all of that kind of stuff. And it's what really kind of held me in my faith. And so, the very first principle of the gospel is faith. And we have this here presented in Alma 32. So we're going to do a lot of reading from Alma 32 here. But before I get into that, I think it's useful sometimes to compare and contrast different understandings on faith. And I believe what Alma 32 is teaching here about faith is very different from what Christianity teaches and from what the LDS Church has been teaching recently. Um, there's this idea that, well, let me ask a question. Does anybody know what the atheist arguments are against faith? Like the worldly arguments. What they don't like about Christianity in regards to faith. Has anybody ever encountered that?
Yes.
You want to elaborate, Andrew?
Okay. So yeah, so usually the argument I run into is if it's not something that can be seen or felt, or B, if it can't be scientifically proven according to what they consider to be science, then it must not be real.
Right, right. If it's not testable, if you can't validate it, it can't be real, kind of, right? Um, well, yeah, that's right. And the reason why they take that approach often is because for a lot of the history of Christianity, the argument has kind of been in that, well, you're supposed to believe. Why? Well, because God said so. There's this idea of blind faith, and I think that's really the crux of the criticism comes from is this idea of blind faith. This idea that it is a virtue to believe because you're told to believe, and this is something very common in most of Christianity, and it's how they explain some of the harder doctrines. Like what happens to all of the people who are going to go to hell because Christ hadn't come yet throughout the history of the world? Well, yeah, it's not very fair that maybe that they'd go to hell, I guess, but I mean, who knows? Just have faith. Just have faith. Um, you got to accept Christ this way. Why? Well, you just kind of got to have faith. Um, so Alma's going to
The
give us
nature,
this.
the nature of God, like the Trinity.
Yeah,
Define the Trinity. Well, we can't. It's a mystery. Well, then why do you believe in it? Because it's
right.
virtual. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the other side of this, which is if it's true, well, show us a sign, right? So this is Alma 32. We're going to start in verse 17 here. Oh, context. Okay. Alma is teaching the people of, I think, the
Hey,
Zoramites here.
hey, Justin, before we dive in, you mentioned LDS kind of traditions about faith. We've kind of represented atheist versus like sectarian Christianity, but maybe do you want to maybe clarify what you were referring to specifically on the LDS tradition on faith?
Right. Well, the simple one is follow the prophet. Uh, don't that is a call to faith. But what does that faith look like in the LDS church? I mean, from a practical standpoint, what does that look like? Because I've got lots of friends and family still in the LDS church, and all of them actually at this point will have some caveat where it's like, yeah, he's the prophet, but there's this, and they've got their issues with it, but they still believe that they need to follow the prophet despite not believing in what the prophet's telling them, or what the direction the church is going, things like that, right?
Or perhaps even more extreme, I had well, this is secondhand. A family member was having a conversation with another family member, and she was telling me about this conversation. And she literally asked this other family member, well, if the prophet told you to jump off of a cliff, would you do it? And the other family member said, yes.
Oh my God.
Right. See, and that's where there's this disconnect, right? And this is a bit of a tricky thing because there are these biblical stories that talk about certain things, like Abraham sacrificing Isaac. These things that are really kind of hard to follow and understand without a grounding in faith. And I believe that's exactly what the Book of Mormon is here for. It's to help clear the air, because if God asked any of you to do human sacrifice with any of your children, I would sincerely hope that you would reject such inspiration.
That might depend on the child.
No human sacrifice. That is not what we do as Mormons. And but there are, if you take this idea of blind faith to an extreme, you get really tragic results sometimes. Honestly, I think if anybody's ever, there's different opinions on it, but like the Mountain Meadow massacre, I think is an example of blind faith run amok. And there's other examples of this throughout history.
Hey,
Um,
Justin.
yeah,
So from my personal encounters, I don't think necessarily that members of the LDS Church have, not everyone, but I think there are more people who become more skeptical of merely just following the prophet since Russell and Nelson. And I discovered that there were several people within my ward who may say one thing. They were saying one thing publicly, like, "Oh yeah, I follow the prophet," but behind the scenes, they were quietly not very happy with a lot of the things he was doing. And I'm not just
right,
talking COVID policies. I'm talking about all the changes he kept making, like the whole don't oh Mormon is the victory for Satan, but we'll sue you. You still use it.
right. Yeah, no, that exactly. And here's the problem with this, beyond just the issues. The problem is if we are supposed to follow the prophet with this blind faith, if that's what is being taught by the church, then the church is not teaching the true principle of faith, because faith is not a a blind surrender of the will to God.
And Joseph Smith taught that he wished all men were prophets.
Hmm. Right. And so the Book of Mormon is going to undermine, the last general conference, probably, as we go through this, as we talk about faith, because the messages there are usually, again, faith is doing what you're told, um, and not questioning it a lot of times. And that really isn't Mormonism as it was established by Joseph Smith. It's not Mormonism as established by the Book of Mormon. So let's jump in here. Now, this first one here, we're going to start in verse 17, and this is a really pertinent question, because if you ever have dealt with atheists, especially aggressive atheists, this comes up a lot. So I'm just going to read here real quick. Yea, there are many who do say, if thou wilt show unto us a sign from heaven, then we shall know of a surety, then we shall believe. I'm going to stop right there before we go any further. Let's talk about this. Why not? Right? Why not? If the Book of Mormon is true, why didn't God just leave us with the golden plates and archaeological evidence that we can pick this apart with? If Joseph Smith was truly a prophet, why don't we have angelic visitors telling us that, yes, we also visited Joseph Smith and did all of that, confirming those things? Why don't we have signs given so that we can know for a surety from a
Because
theological perspective?
signs don't build faith in and of themselves. If if I were to be an atheist and an angel suddenly appeared to me, then I would still be an atheist, just with an angel appearing to me.
All right, great. Michaela, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I think there needs to be opposition so that we can better practice agency. And I think God does give us a lot of signs. The question is just more of whether we have eyes to see and ears to hear.
Very good. Anybody else have any thoughts before we really dig in? Before we see what Alma has to say about it, I guess. Okay. Well, in that case, let's finish this verse and see how Alma explains this. Because this is a question that comes up a lot in religion. Um, if it's true, show me a sign. So we're going to continue in verse 18. Now I ask, is this faith? Behold, I say unto you, nay. For if a man knoweth a thing, he hath no cause to believe, for he knoweth it. And now, how much more cursed is he that knoweth the will of God, and doeth it not? than he that only believeth, or only hath cause to believe, and falleth into transgression. Now of this thing ye must judge. Behold, I say unto you that it is on the one hand, even as it is on the other, and it shall be unto every man according to his work. What do you think? What is Alma trying to explain here? Anybody else? Zach or Joni and Corey? Any thoughts?
So it's
Yes.
interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Whoever was
No, you
talking.
go first. I've
Okay.
been talking.
It's interesting how you could even say God withholding this sign that we say that we want is an act of mercy. Because if he told you something that was true and then you didn't live up to that light, it would be your condemnation.
Right. Zach, I see your hand up.
Sorry, I was getting food. So there's a concept that I've also been that kind of plays into this being judged not only for what you receive or not only for what you become, but what you could have become, if that makes sense. And when it comes to that, it's the same reason why God will take away knowledge from people that have received it. They live their life a little while with God and then reject it, and then he takes away that was in their heart. The reason for that is because that's actually a mercy, because you will be judged based on the light you received when you received it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question, and this is more rhetorical, but it shall be unto every man according to his work. That's talking about God's judgment, right? Just like Zach was just saying. This is about God's judgment. So, do you obey God's laws perfectly? The ones that you know?
Negative.
Me too. Me
Speak for
too.
yourself.
Yeah. I don't live it perfectly. That's not the hard part isn't necessarily believing. The hard part's the doing, right?
Yeah.
Um and so if God did give this manifestation of the truth of all things to all mankind all at once, would we be any better than we are? Would that knowledge save us?
No.
I don't think it would, honestly. Um, I'll tell you, for a long time, I was involved in, the kind of constitutional liberty movement, and there was a conspiracy theorist guy named Alex Jones who was really, really big on the evil corruption, basically the drain the swamp before we use that terminology, and he would talk about all these problems and how we're not living according to American foundational principles anymore. And he had a website, Prison Planet, InfoWars, and his whole idea was, man, we need to wake people up. We need to wake them up so that we can save this country. Wake them up if they only knew what the government was really doing. And he felt like he knew the truth of that. And lo and behold, after COVID, everybody talks about these days how, wow, Alex Jones was right about a lot of stuff. Um, and the president talks about the swamp publicly, um, and yet things don't seem to be any better. Now people distrust the government now more than ever before after COVID, and yet has the government actually improved? Is knowledge enough to save us? Yeah, Andrew.
Information, maybe
Or
I would
information.
I would
Yeah, yeah,
differentiate
sure.
information from knowledge, but yeah.
Yeah. Did you have
I
something,
think
Andrew?
I did. I think if like the Lord were to just dispense all knowledge to us all at once without us having to work for it, then we wouldn't do us any good. I mean, because we have to, we have to be in a state of learning. Part of this life is not just learning about the sciences or government or whatever. It's about learning about God as well. And when we're told that we have to work, that's one of the things we have to work for.
100%. Yeah. Michaela.
Kind of along those lines, I was listening to a podcast recently, where the woman who was on has these classes that you can go and pay for. And she was explaining why she has people pay for them. And she said that she's found that one, she put a lot of time and energy into it, so she kind of wants something back for the time and energy, but then also people are more likely to get more out of the classes if they pay for it because now they've invested in it. And I think it's a similar way with how God works, is if we've put in the time and effort to learning line upon line, precept by precept, and we have spent time growing our faith, then we'll actually do something with that information. Where if we're just kind of given that information, then we're less likely to do anything with it and more likely to just take it for granted.
Right. Yeah. And you're getting into the meat of the sermon there too, because that's kind of exactly what Alma's going to start explaining here. I think that faith is not a passive thing; it's an active thing. It's something you have to work at to receive. It's not something that can just come about. And as I have pondered why, I kind of feel like part of the reason too is God doesn't want us to obey Him because He told us so. I think God wants us to obey Him because what He's asking us to do resonates with us. There are all kinds of gospels out there that are appealing to men. There's gospels that, hey, just confess Christ's name, say this prayer, and you're saved, and He takes away all of your sins, and you don't have to do anything else, and you
That's
can
my
even
favorite.
continue sinning, and you're good, right? Were you saying something, Andrew?
Yeah, I said that's my favorite gospel. I love that one.
Right. And then you've got like prosperity gospel where, if you do what God tells you, then all the things that you want in life will come to you. Um, well, I mean, man, we went through that. We were going through that long series, right? The Sermon on the Mount. That's not what I think Jesus was saying there. I think he kind of was saying the opposite in some ways. Um, Now there are obviously rewards and blessings for obeying God's law. Don't get me wrong, but God's not promising us riches. Not that's not the reward. Um, Now, if it comes, it comes, right? I'm not saying you've got to live in poverty to be a good Christian. But as far as a prosperity gospel, though, that's not scriptural either, right? And so there's all these different gospels out there. I believe the gospel of Mormonism, though, says that it's not about it's not about the reward, it's about who you become. And I think instead of God wanting us to do things because He said so, I think He wants us to do the things He asks us to do because we want to, because those things bring blessings into our lives. That those things that we have tasted the fruit of those works, and it tastes good to us. And if you get to a place like that, well, then you're under no condemnation necessarily if God does reveal something to you by an angel or a miraculous experience, because you didn't just choose to believe, you put in the work to believe. So Alma's going to teach us how to put in the work, and we're going to skip ahead a little bit up here to Alma 26. Is anybody got the
32,
scriptures right?
chapter 32, verse
Chapter
20.
32, verse 26. Yeah. 26 to 27. Has anybody got the scriptures out? Want to read?
I do.
All right, Andrew,
Concerning,
go ahead. 26 to
concerning
27.
26, okay. Now, as I said concerning faith, that it was not a perfect knowledge, even that. Now, as I said concerning faith, that it was not a perfect knowledge, even so it is with my words. Ye cannot know of their surety at first into perfection, any more than faith is a perfect knowledge. But behold, if you will awake and arouse your faculty, even to an experiment on my words, and exercise a particle of faith, yea, even if you can no more than desire to believe, let this desire work in you, even until you believe in a manner that you can give place for a portion of my words. Ooh, I have a personal story about this. Ooh, so this reminds me of when I first learned about the Adam God teachings, right?
Mm,
So the first time I heard about it, I was like, I didn't have a clue. I was intrigued by it. I didn't have a clue. I didn't poo-poo it. I didn't reject it, but I didn't understand it at first. But I put in some time to understand it, right? So as I learned more and more about it, I was able to jettison the previous ideas that were in my mind, and I was able to fully accept and grasp the Adam God teaching. It was a process. It took me a few years to do it, but I didn't just flat out reject it. And I think that was I think that was a big act of faith on my part.
absolutely. Well, and we kind of skipped over this, but I mean, the first part of this is Taylor. I think sidetracked me a little bit. We went and talked about LDS stuff again. The context for this chapter, right, is Alma's preaching among the Zoramites, and the Zoramites believe that they are God's chosen people, that they are elected and saved, as long as they go up and recite a rote prayer once a week on their big altar. And Alma shows up and he's trying to teach these people, and they see their form of worship and like, wow, that's kind of bizarre, and they're not having a lot of success reaching these people. But then the poor among them show up, and that's who this sermon is directed at, because the poor show up and they're like, what should we do? Because we're not wealthy enough to enter their temple and perform their rituals that have to be done so that we can go to heaven. Sound familiar? And so they're like, what should we do? And this is Alma trying to teach them how to have a relationship with God and how to know what to do. Because this is the first principle of the gospel, and it's fundamental to all other principles and aspects of the gospel. This is where it starts. And one of the things that really sticks out to me here is he says, even if you can no more than desire to believe. And I believe that's actually where faith starts. It starts with desire. You don't know for sure. You don't know, but you desire. You desire to believe something. And, having studied religion, I don't know of a more desirable gospel than the Mormon gospel. I mean, hands down. Nothing comes close. I mean, the Christian gospel is if you're saved, you go to heaven. You're kind of a spirit. You're playing harps for Jesus all day, right? There's no family. There's no eternal progression. There's no worlds without end. You get into Buddhism, right? And you're just going to keep living and dying and living and dying until you strip every amount of desire and expectation in your heart out, and then you ascend. When you are, I mean, essentially no longer human. I think, because I think humans are our desires. We we meet people. We want to associate with them. We care about them. We have families. We have spouses. We have children. We have aspirations. And in Buddhism, salvation is becoming dead inside to all of your desires, right? Um, and something like more of a new age stuff, somewhat with Hinduism, is you've got this salvation is becoming one again with the source kind of thing, right? Where you lose your identity. The Gnostics believe that life is just suffering, and salvation is to not have basically mortality. That God is an oppressive monster that created us in a prison, and salvation is escaping this physical world and escaping from God. All of these. none of these sound very appealing to me, to be honest. I don't know of a gospel that personally I would have greater desire to believe than what is promised in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, and if it starts out with just a desire, Alma's saying that's okay. That's okay. We can start with just desire. But what if something's not true, right? Like, what if I desire to believe that men can become women and women can become men? Is desire going to be enough? Because there's also reality. There's actually truth as well, what the truth of something is. And so we have to temper maybe our desires with truth as well. And Alma's going to show us basically how to navigate that. So the first part is, he says, arouse your faculties even to an experiment on my words. Now this is interesting. Alma's not saying, hey, I'm the prophet, follow the prophet. I mean, he is the prophet. He's the head of the church. He's the head of the Nephite church, right? And this is a Nephite colony. He's their prophet. But he's not coming in swinging authority. He's also not saying, well, if you turn to the brass plates, section 5, it says you have to do this. He's not even appealing to scripture. He's appealing to personal experience. He wants you to experiment upon his words. Well, that means find out for yourself. That's the antithesis of blind faith. This is actually sounding very scientific. So let's keep going. How do we do this experiment? Anybody else want to read 28 to 30? Michaela.
Verse 28 to 30. Now we will compare the word unto seed. Now, if ye give place that a seed may be planted in your heart, behold, if it be a true seed or a good seed, if ye do not cast it out by your unbelief, that ye will resist the Spirit of the Lord, behold, it will begin to swell within your breast. And when you feel these swelling motions, you will begin to say within yourselves, it must needs be that this is a good seed, or that the word is good, for it beginneth to enlarge my soul. Yea, it beginneth to enlighten my understanding. Yea, it beginneth to be delicious to me. Now behold, would not this increase your faith? I say unto you, yea. Nevertheless, it hath not grown up to a perfect knowledge. But behold, as the seed swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow, then you must needs say that the seed is good. For behold, it swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow. Now behold, will not this strengthen your faith? Yea, it will strengthen your faith. For ye will say, I know that this is a good seed. For behold, it sprouteth and beginneth to grow.
Thank you. All right. So, what are the signs of a true seed? What are we looking for? Because again, we don't want to be deceived. I want truth more than I want truth more than I want Mormonism even. So, how do we know if the seed is good?
It enlarges the soul, enlighteneth understanding.
Yeah, and it beginneth to be delicious to me. Right. Um, so to contrast this, when I was first kind of crashing out of the LDS Church, I'd been having my own issues for quite a while with things that just weren't sitting well with me. And I read a book by this guy, Denver Snuffer, called Passing the Heavenly Gift. And in it, he puts forth this case that the LDS Church went apostate when they didn't finish the temple in time. And so Joseph Smith was a true prophet, but Brigham Young was kind of a charlatan, and everything since then has just been people making stuff up. And he pointed out a lot of legitimate, serious problems that I also recognize in the church today, the church as we see it today. As I read this book, I felt an oppressive darkness. Now, you might say, well, you just felt that way because this contradicts your previous beliefs. Well, actually, though, in my case, it was kind of confirming some of my previous beliefs, concerns about how the church was doing with financial things, having to do with the church's lack of defense of constitutional law and things. It was kind of confirming some stuff, but I didn't like how I felt. It wasn't enlarging my soul. It didn't swell within my breast. It didn't enlighten my understanding. And I found myself feeling very cynical and pessimistic and a bit of an oppressive darkness. Now, fortunately, it was also right around this time that I found some books at a bookstore written by Ogden Kraut. And interestingly, Ogden Kraut's messages were very similar in critique of the current state of the LDS Church. However, there was more. He wasn't just saying it's all gone astray. He was saying this is what is gone astray and this is how it should be. And some of the things that really stood out to me, for example, was the way that he described prayer circles being done in homes between husband and wife. That really stood out to me. I had never heard of such a thing before in my life. I was raised that no, prayer circles only happen in the temple if you're doing a session for the dead, and at best you get to stand in the circle to participate. You don't get to lead circles. You cannot have your own prayer circle in the temple. You can't do any of that. And Ogden Kraut's telling me you can. You used to get your endowment out, and then you did prayer circles at home with your wife whenever you felt a need, and you could gather friends together who were also endowed, and you could have prayer circles together. And I'll tell you what, that beganeth to be delicious to me. And so, whereas the stuff I was reading with Ogden Kraut seemed to shrink my soul, as I was reading Ogden Kraut describe Mormonism as it was intended to be, I did begin to feel a swelling in my breast, just like when I had originally read the Book of Mormon for the first time. And that was the beginning of my journey into fundamentalism. And it's also the first step here in this process of developing faith in anything according to Alma. God, again, he's not asking you to blindly obey. He wants you to know, but he wants you to know because you're doing it. You're living according to your faith. Does anybody have any experiences living according to your faith and having that spiritual testimony from the effects of actually living that faith? Oh, I see Andrew, your hand's up. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so what's funny is basically I had similar experiences too with encountering Denver Snuffer. Uh, I read some of his previous books, like his first book was I think it was Communing with the Lord Through the Veil, which was really good. And then I did read Passing the Heavenly Gift. And you're right, he does bring up legitimate issues with the church. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's been very successful with his group, is because he's able to, play on the faith of those around him, because he's able to say, look, they're doing wrong, so what I'm bringing to you must be right because they're wrong. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's got such a following, because he is able to point out things that may be going wrong. But you're right
Right,
about Trout. Like his stuff just blew me away. Like I love Ogden Kraut. I wish I could have met the man.
right. Thanks, Andrew. Zach, go ahead.
So one experience I had living by faith that's been really interesting is I grew up in the public school. So for me, it was very much kind of like a battleground sometimes of just a ton of different ideas. I had a lot of adults telling me I was just wrong. I had a lot of my own peers. And when I would read the scriptures and do them and feel that burning, that's what I held to. That's what I really buckled down and said, this is correct, regardless of what everyone tells me is wrong. This is correct.
Gotcha. Yeah. So oftentimes, right, persecution can can lead to a sense of renewed conviction and loyalty to whatever it is that's you feel is being attacked. Um, but that's not always. I mean, that can, again. So we're just talking about planting the seed still, right? We're just getting started in this journey, and that's ultimately not where we want to leave things, though, because there's a lot of that. That is a bit of a human reaction, as Andrew pointed out. Often in relationships, man. So if you think about, like, you know, maybe there's a girl you like or a guy you like, and then maybe you're dating, and then a friend or family comes along, is like, oh, that person's not good for you. Your initial reaction is, yeah, what are you talking about? This person's perfect. They've never done anything wrong. I could never find a better partner in the. We get really defensive. Um, I've seen this kind of play out to somewhat comedic effect multiple times in my life. Um, we have a tendency to really get defensive. I mean, even right now, right, with the church's lawsuits against Denver Snuffer for using the word Mormon, which maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll be coming after me soon too. We'll see.
John DeLynn.
apparently they want the word Mormon back. Yeah, they're going after John DeLynn. And there's a knee jerk reaction, though, where John DeLynn has attacked Mormonism, fundamentalism, the LDS Church, all of it, and sometimes I think very dishonestly and unfairly and incorrectly. So it's really easy to get defensive and be like, well, he's the bad guy. He's the bad guy. And that means that's more proof that, my current beliefs are right. Um, However, that kind of automatic reaction isn't necessarily the truth, because it happens both ways, right? The anti-Mormons also go up in arms when people do talk about positive fruits and effects from the LDS Church, and that gets them riled up, and I don't want to believe it. No, it can't be true. They got more stable families. No way. Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. They're just making that up. They're just brainwashed, right? We tend to disregard things that challenge us automatically and dig in harder to with what we already have, and that's where a lot of faith starts. Um, but we want to go further than that, right? Because we want to know truth. We don't want to just inherit the faith that we're given. We want to have a testimony. So if you've been in the LDS Church, you've probably heard this phrase before: the testimony is gained in the bearing of it. That's what I was told on my mission when I was in the MTC, because a lot of us there were a bunch of young guys, some gals, and we didn't uh, we didn't have a lot of experience with our religion yet, right? And it can be kind of scary to talk to strangers and to profess things. And they tried to encourage us by saying, it's okay, if you're not sure if you have a testimony, because, a testimony is found in the bearing of it. I want to discuss that. Is that true?
No,
No? Andrew says no. How come?
no, because uh, if you're bearing the testimony is found in the bearing of it. It's kind of an oxymoron, in my opinion, because it doesn't
Okay.
make any sense. If you're not for sure about something, then you can't really testify and say that you know something is true. And there may be various ways you can bear your testimony, such as maybe you don't have that for sure knowledge, but you believe. I think it may be appropriate to say you believe something, but yeah, I don't. I kind of, I don't buy that.
Okay. Michaela, what's your take?
I think in some ways that can, just because you're repeating it to yourself. But when it comes to actual trials, it's not much of a testimony that you can stand on. And I think that gaining a testimony comes more through being tried. So, like, for example, when I kind of had a I grew up in the LDS church, so I kind of had a testimony of God and Christ and everything growing up. But I didn't really have my own testimony until I hit my personal rock bottom and was faced with a lot of hardship. And I really had to ask myself, is God real? And do I actually believe he'll answer my prayers?
Right. So, yeah. Anybody else have a take on this one before I chime in? Don't want to. Okay. Oh, Taylor?
Yeah, testimony is different from an expression of belief. Testimony implies, like Kayla was saying, that it has been tested. It requires experiential knowledge to be able to bear a testimony. You can profess a belief in something without any experience or knowledge, but you can't bear a testimony unless you've actually tried the principle and seen the result.
Right. Very good. Yeah, I mean, testimony, this is a legal term actually, right? Testimony is a legal term, and a testimony means that you are a witness to something. The only testimony found in the bearing of it is the testimony that you have the courage to bear a testimony, maybe, but it doesn't say anything to the content of your testimony. A willingness to say something is not proof that what you're saying is true. What is? What is a witness that you could use to bear a testimony?
I've got an easy example. If you can have faith in a principle, for instance, tithing, but you don't have a testimony of it until you act on that faith, pay some tithing, and see the benefits or the blessings that come into your life as a result. And it may be temporal, but more likely it'll be spiritual. And then after you've put the principle to the test and you've seen the results that came from it, now you have a testimony. And that can be applied to any principle.
Right. Yeah. So we want to do what Alma's saying here, right? We want to plant that seed and see what happens to it. We don't want to start talking about something we don't really have any personal experience with in an authoritative way until we do. I think that's why I just recently saw something that 40% of LDS missionaries are leaving the church within 6 months of getting back from their missions right now. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I do know that I think that a lot of people are taking issues with, they were taught that, right? And they went and they did that, and then they didn't develop faith. They just had a testimony, and they're coming back feeling more like they were used car salesmen than disciples of Christ preaching the gospel, which is tragic. Oh, Michaela, yeah.
I do find that statistic interesting. And I know from my own personal experience, I don't know on what scale this is true. This is just what I saw growing up in Utah County, was a lot of, you're going on a mission because you have to go on a mission, and you'll gain your testimony on a mission. I know people who, when their children have started to struggle with their testimony, they'll tell their children, go on a mission because that's how you'll gain it. And I also know a family who personally, one of the reasons why they moved was because their son was sent home early from the mission due to health conditions. And then when his health conditions were better, he refused to go back out. And so it was one of the reasons why they moved, was because of the embarrassment of that. And so it's very interesting because in the early days of the church, you had these older men who very much had a testimony, and that's part of why they were preaching.
Right. It wasn't being it was a calling. It was a priesthood office called the 70, right? And it was a lifelong calling, unless you advance further up. But it was a big deal preaching the gospel. It was a very big deal. It was considered more like a profession in the amount of preparation, experience, and things that you were expected to have and develop. Um, you
And
know, oh yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
they often had families too. They were married, often had families. Like Addison Pratt, he was one of those who was older, married, more seasoned in life in his testimony, and yet he spent years amongst the Polynesian people.
Yeah, yep, that's right. That's right. So, you
Can
know,
I also chime in
yeah, yeah,
about the whole situation with the missionaries? I think because I've seen that too, and I personally believe it. I think part of the issue too is that in the LDS Church, you're given basically a very curated list, if you will, of things to know and to believe. It's very correlated, and you have that when you go into the mission. And I think a big part of maybe why some of them are walking away is that they're discovering things about their faith, about the history of their faith that they didn't know prior to their mission, or they probably found out about it on their mission. And I'll give you an example. I learned in my mission for the first time that the temple endowment originally had penalties in it, and I was just like, say what? I was like, what? Yeah, I've never been told that prior to that. So I think if for many of them, they just didn't know, and now they're discovering these things, and I think there's a lot of betrayal, or there's a feeling of betrayal.
absolutely. Yeah. Taylor?
Yeah, to emphasize that point, I have a quote from B.H. Roberts, his biography. He said, "Suppose your youth receive their impressions of church history from pictures and stories, and build their faith upon these alleged miracles, and shall someday come face to face with the fact that their belief rests on falsehoods. What then will be the result? Will they not say that since these things are myth, and our church has permitted them to be perpetuated, might not the other fundamentals to the actual story of the church, the things in which it had its origin, might they not all be lies and nothing but lies? Some say that because one repudiates the false, he stands in danger of weakening, perhaps losing the truth. I have no fear of such results. I find my own heart strengthened in the truth by getting rid of the untruth, the spectacular, the bizarre, as soon as I learn that it is based upon worthless testimony."
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of a worthwhile thing to look at, I think, here. Many of us are, some of us are parents, some of us are parents to be probably still. And I think it's, Michaela brought up this whole idea of people sending their children out on missions so they can gain a testimony. What what should they do instead? Like as a parent, what should a parent do if you've got a child that's struggling in the faith? If not, send them out on a mission.
Send them to EFY. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh boy.
And there were a lot of, you know, I say that tongue in cheek, but it was the same situation because I went to EFY, but it was different because I wanted to be there versus you could tell who was there because mom and dad sent them there because they're struggling with their testimony.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
that's just pawning it off on somebody else. Like, man,
Mm.
Timmy's struggling or whatever, right? So maybe if I send him pawn this off on, you know, whatever program that lasts for a week or a couple of years, just maybe, but that it doesn't work that way because first of all, it has to come from desire from the individual, really, no matter what you do.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, Michaela.
I think one of the better options would be that parents make sure that they're a safe place for their children to come to with questions of, oh, I heard this. what do you know about it? And if you don't know about it, then be open and willing to go look it up. I had an institute teacher who I actually loved a lot, because one of the biggest things he did was, I'm willing to talk about anything, any of the hard stuff, anything you have questions on. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just tell you I don't know. And we can go look it up together, or I can look it up on my own and come back to you with what I find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good approach. So could you imagine, well, maybe you can, but could you imagine being a young adult, you know, essentially still a teenager, right? And your parents aren't happy with you. They're not satisfied with you. And they feel like you're defective, and they want you to, they're pawning you off onto the church to get you fixed. I'd feel very betrayed by my parents, I think, if that happened to me. Fortunately, that's not how I ended up on a mission in the LDS Church. I ended up on a mission because I felt I was a Jack Mormon kid, and I felt the Spirit calling me, saying I'm supposed to do this, and I didn't even know what a mission meant. I didn't know what it entailed. I didn't know the doctrines. I just felt God calling me, and so I followed the voice, and here I am, 27 years later. But I was there because I felt like God wanted me to be there. My parents would have accepted me either way, but I think that would be very detrimental to faith. The Book of Mormon tells us that parents are responsible for their children, to teach them, to make sure that they grow up well. The church should be able to support you in that, but I think sending young men and women off on missions because they're having a faith crisis, or they don't have a strong testimony. I think that's very detrimental in the long run. I think it's damaging to relationships, and I don't think it's certainly not what Alma's talking about here. Alma says, "How do we get a testimony?" Let's keep going. This is some good stuff here. So he's telling us first we need to have a desire, and then we need to act on that desire. And we plant the seed, and by planting the seed, by not just immediately casting it off, we're going to try this out. We're going to wait and see what happens. Does it begin to swell within our breast? We're looking for evidence that the thing that we're questioning is true. We're seeking, because we don't faith. If something's not true, you can't have faith in it. You can be delusioned, you can be brainwashed, but you can't have faith if something's not true. And so we need to know that it's true for ourselves, not because our parents taught us it was true, not because the church said it was true, not because the prophet says it's true, not because the Book of Mormon says it's true, but because I have personally put some work into this. And I can say that I am a better person. I am a more healed person. I'm a more functional person. There are blessings in my life. There are problems that I have been able to overcome because I followed X. And now you can start getting a testimony. But is X true? That's how we find out if X is true. Now, just because we know something is true, we know this is a good seed, we're still not done. We're still not finished in this journey. So now we're going to do verses 31 to 35. Anybody like to read? Anybody else?
I can.
You got that, Taylor?
Yeah. 31. And now behold, are ye sure that this is a good seed? I say unto you, yea, for every seed bringeth forth unto its own likeness. Therefore, if a seed groweth, it is good, but if it groweth not, behold, it is not good. Therefore, it is cast away. And now, behold, because ye have tried the experiment and planted the seed, it swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow. Ye must needs know that the seed is good. And now, behold, is your knowledge perfect? Yea, your knowledge is perfect in that thing, and your faith is dormant. And this because you know, for ye know that the word hath swelled your souls, and ye also know that it hath sprouted up, that your understanding doth begin to be enlightened, and your mind doth begin to expand. O then, is not this real? I say unto you, yea, because it is light. And whatsoever is light is good, because it is discernible. Therefore ye must know that it is good.
All right, thank you. So if you plant the seed, let's say Book of Mormon, okay, let's say we plant the seed of the Book of Mormon. How do we plant the seed? Well, we're going to study it out, right? Not from a place of disbelief, with a desire to believe, but also with a critical eye, right? We want to. It's not asking us to just accept things. It's telling us to find out what happens when you act upon it. So I'm going to read the Book of Mormon. I'm going to humble myself. Is this true? Isn't this true? I'm just going to read it and see what happens. And you start having this testimony starts growing within you of the Book of Mormon. Okay, great. And now you know that the Book of Mormon, you have a testimony of the Book of Mormon. Are you done? Are we finished? Now we have it, because now that I have a testimony of the Book of Mormon, I know that Joseph Smith is a prophet. And if Joseph Smith's a prophet, then he restored the true church. And if he restored the true church, then the LDS is the true church. And everything Dallin H. Oaks says is prophetic and inspired, and that's what I should do, right?
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, yeah.
Now,
Or maybe we only have a testimony of the Book of Mormon, and we still need to develop a testimony for all those other things, if they are true.
yeah, Justin, it's funny you should mention that because I live up here in Kansas City, and this area is defined by people who have testimonies of the Book of Mormon, but aren't necessarily members of the LDS Church. And in fact, there's a 2-day conference coming up where it's the Book of Mormon symposium where presenters from all different restoration traditions will be presenting on Book of Mormon and Book of Mormon themes. And most who attend are not members of the LDS Church.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. So yeah, there's more to be done, right? There's more work to do. There's more faith to develop. Even if we get a perfect knowledge, that knowledge is only perfect in that one thing. So let's keep going here. Where do we go next? This is going to be 36 to 40. Maybe I'll read that. Unless there's anybody else who's got the scriptures and like to read. I think those that have them have already shared. So I'll do this one. And now behold, after ye have tasted this light, is your knowledge perfect? Behold, I say unto you, nay, neither must ye lay aside your faith. For ye have only exercised your faith to plant the seed, and ye might try the experiment to know if the seed was good. And behold, as the tree beginneth to grow, ye will say, let us nourish it with great care, that it may get root, that it may grow up and bring forth fruit unto us. And now behold, if you nourish it with much care, it will get root and grow up and bring forth fruit. But if ye neglect the tree and take no thought for its nourishment, behold, it will not get any root. And when the heat of the sun cometh and scorcheth it, because it hath no root, it withers away, and ye pluck it up and cast it out. Now this is not because the seed was not good, neither is it because the fruit thereof would not be desirable. But it is because your ground is barren, and ye will not nourish the tree. Therefore ye cannot have the fruit thereof. And thus, if ye will not nourish the word, looking forward with an eye of faith to the fruit thereof, ye can never pluck of the fruit of the tree of life. So we talked a little bit about how, so thus far we know that something's true because we planted the seed. Will we always know it's true?
No.
No. Right. And this is exactly what you alluded to at the beginning, right? Andrew, you were talking about how if we don't preserve our testimony, God God will take that. Wait, I think that was Andrew. Is that Zach? One of you guys, somebody had shared that.
I'll take
It,
credit.
you'll take credit. Nice. If we don't hold on, if we don't nourish it, we can lose that testimony. We can cast out the tree, or in other words, we could also potentially cast out the baby with the bathwater. And I think this is really important to understand, because when you just focus on a single issue, I've got a testimony of the Book of Mormon, therefore I assume my testimony of all this other stuff, and that other stuff turns out to have some inconsistencies with it, that will uproot your tree. That will pluck that seed right out. The other reason here is that you have to keep working at it. Just because you gain a testimony of the Book of Mormon because you read it once, well, that's the start, right? And now you know the Book of Mormon is true. But if you don't keep studying it, if you don't dig into it, if you don't find ways of applying it to your life every day, it doesn't grow into a tree. The roots don't take. And your testimony is only temporary. Michaela.
I think this is part of why the scriptures often exhort us to remember and also to keep records. It's important to go back through those records that we have to remember, not only for ourselves, but also to carry on the tradition, or not traditions, the doctrines.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So yeah, there will come trial, and this isn't a question of if either. Alma doesn't say that if you don't nourish the tree, it might not grow. He's saying it will not grow. He says when the heat of the sun cometh and scorcheth it, because it hath no root, it withers away. And this isn't just true of our testimony of the Book of Mormon. This is true of our testimony of everything. If we do not nourish our testimonies, if we do not nourish our faith, if this is not constantly an active pursuit in our life, that faith will not remain. It will not stay. And this is also, as was pointed out, so that we aren't condemned, so that we don't receive more truth than we're capable of living. And isn't this a beautiful way of doing this, where we, through our own personal experience, we can know of a truth, but we only really get that testimony of it as we're living it, so as not to fall under the condemnation of the law for knowing things and not doing them. God's got this beautiful system in place here where he reveals unto us line upon line, precept upon precept, meaning that he gives us just enough for our growth. And then when we get that down, he gives us more, bit by bit, instead of flooding us all at once with more than we could potentially handle. And I will be honest, coming into fundamentalism was a bit of a deluge. it was like drinking from a fire hose at first, because there was just so much that I didn't know, right? And suddenly I have to study all of this church history. I've got to study this other branch of the Restoration's history and doctrines, and there was just so much to explore. And I'm not finished, and hopefully nobody else here is either, because again, until we get to the point where we can pluck of the fruit of the tree of life, there's more growing, there's more faith to be developed. So I got one last section here, if I can get a reader from 41 to the end of the chapter.
I can do it.
All right, thank you, Michaela.
Okay. But if ye will nourish the word, ye nourish the tree as it beginneth to grow, by your faith with great diligence and with patience, looking forward to the fruit thereof, it shall take root, and behold, it shall be a tree springing up unto everlasting life. And because of your diligence and your faith and your patience with the word and nourishing it, that it may take root in you, behold, by and by ye shall pluck the fruit thereof, which is most precious, which is sweet above all that is sweet, and which is white above all that is white. Yea, and pure above all that is pure. And ye shall feast upon this fruit, even until ye are filled, that ye hunger not, neither shall ye thirst. Then, my brethren, ye shall reap the rewards of your faith, in your diligence and patience and long suffering, waiting for the tree to bring forth fruit unto you.
Thank you. And this is a beautiful explanation of what it's all for. Why develop faith? Why go through all this work? It's a lot easier just to choose to believe something. Believe you me, it's a lot easier to just choose to believe something. Why go through all this work? Because you're nurturing a living thing within yourself, this living testimony. And it's the only way to get to this fruit. And this tree of this fruit is a hearkening back to Nephi's vision, right? And Lehi's vision, where they see this tree with the fruit of life, with the fruit of life on it. And this is an opportunity that we are all called to pursue. The temple ordinances teach us this as well, that we are trying to return to the presence of God so we can partake of that fruit. And this is the map, this is the roadmap on how to get there. This is the daily work that we do in this process. And it should be a daily thing. You should I really like what Michaela said about journaling. There's a lot of value in that. Even if you don't go back and review the record, just the very act of taking the time to think about what's happened in my life, what's important, where am I right now, what do I believe right now, that self-assessment, right? There's a huge blessing in that, because that if you get in a habit of doing something like that, you're in the habit of building your faith now. And as you pursue your faith, the promise here is this is the way to get, I mean, hunger not, neither shall ye thirst. That's what Christ promises and blesses. When he's talking to the woman at the well, he's not talking about physical hunger and thirst. He's talking about spiritual hunger and thirst. And I don't know about all of you, but I still hunger and thirst spiritually. I want more. I'm not satiated yet. I'm not there yet. But this is Alma's testimony that we can get there. And I have reason to believe Alma. I have reason to believe Alma. I'm not just saying this because it came out of the Book of Mormon and that's my book. I'm saying this because I have begun this journey with seeds. And I don't know how it all works because, you got all these different seeds, but it seems like you're trying to grow it into one tree in the end. But I've got various seeds planted in various stages of faith myself. It's okay to have doubts. In fact, that's what Alma's kind of asking you to do here. He's saying it's okay to have doubts, but just experiment, give it a shot. And in my own personal experience, and I guess that's all I can really speak for, the gospel of Jesus Christ has never let me down. Not in my darkest moments, not in my greatest rebellion with God. Never have the principles of the Book of Mormon let me down. I have a very idyllic life. I'm no longer a member of the church I started in, but I have received all of the blessings that I ever imagined I could receive in this life, and I already have them. And my sights are set higher now, and I'm receiving even more. And this is available to all of us. This is how we grow our testimonies. This is how we receive the things that we need in our life. We humble ourselves and we experiment with the word, and we watch and see, is this working or is this not working? All too often in Christianity, there is a paralyzing fear of offending God. And I don't think you should do something if you think that if you have a testimony that it's wrong, right? There's things that you don't need to experience in this life. But at the same time, if you do experience some things and it wasn't true, that's not a disaster. That's how we grow. Nobody gets through this life unscathed. We all have our low moments. We all face trials that we don't overcome or endure as our Savior Jesus Christ would have. That does not disqualify you from being a child of God. That's what gets you there. But that's repentance, and I think that's probably what we'll cover next time. So,
And
anybody else got something?
if I can maybe share one other quote to bring it full circle, the conversation began about blind faith in leadership. There is a quote, I think I actually read it last week, but it just ties in perfectly here to contrast this true perspective and understanding of the principle of faith from a lot of the traditions. And you were talking about if you have a testimony, doesn't matter who tells you to disobey it, like you need to hold to it. This is from the Millennial Star editor Samuel Richards. Um, it's attributed to Joseph Smith in places. So it says, "We have heard men who hold the priesthood remark that they would do anything they were told to do by those who preside over them, even if they knew it was wrong. But such obedience as this, or you could say blind faith, is worse than folly to us. It is slavery in the extreme, and the man who would thus willingly degrade himself should not claim a rank among intelligent beings until he turns from his folly. A man of God would despise the idea. Others, in the extreme exercise of their almighty authority, have taught that such obedience was necessary, and that no matter what the saints were told to do by their presidents, they should do it without any questions. When elders of Israel will so far indulge in these extreme notions of obedience as to teach them to the people, it is generally because they have it in their hearts to do wrong themselves." And you brought up Mountain Meadows massacre as an extreme example of this mindset. But it is pervasive, and maybe leaders aren't telling you to go and commit murder, but this is such an important thing. I put in the comments, you can't outsource responsibility. If you're a parent, your kids are struggling, you can't rely on an institution or a church or some other person to help your children navigate that. That is what this whole life is intended to prepare us to do. And if we haven't been diligent in that preparation, then we'll be unprepared. But we can't change the past. We can control this moment on. And even if you are super prepared, like Michaela was saying, this institute teacher, he had studied a lot, but you have to have that humility as well of, if my kids throw me a curveball and I don't know how to answer, I shouldn't like make up on the spot and tell them to trust my authority. Right? We need to be humble lifelong to pursue truth at all hazards and have trust in the Lord and his plan and wisdom to guide us.
Okay. Anybody else want any comments before we wrap up here? All right. Well, I will say, in my darkest hours, my testimony has seen me through. That's why I believe what I believe. It's not dogma. It's not because I was brainwashed. It's not because my parents raised me this way. I have a testimony, and I try to have a testimony of everything that I can. And ideally, we pursue that through the good things, living God's law, and having the testimony. You can obtain a testimony that way. You can also obtain a testimony by disobeying God's law. That's not ideal, but it's also okay. It's that's what the atonement's for. And so we'll get into that and repentance here next week. But I guess if we might as well wrap up here, Michaela, I guess, would you be willing to give us a closing prayer tonight?
Yeah, I can. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you that we could gather together and talk about Alma 32 and faith. And thank you that the Spirit could be with us. And please help us to be able to keep the Spirit with us wherever we may be going and whatever we may still need to do this day. And thank you for the preparation that was put in by the teachers. And please help us to stay safe and healthy wherever we may be. In the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Have
See
a
you next
great
week.
week. See ya.